power of the sun in the palm of my hand. Hello Exiles, long time no see, unless you saw my little patch note video, in which case we discovered KITAVA'S Thirst has survived Nerfageddon. Very happy to say that. Very happy to say that this character will be making a return next league. I will probably be playing it on live stream, and if you're here for the first time, I should probably get into how this build works, what it does, and why you should consider playing it. So, for starters, the only thing in this build that is really mandatory to get it started is the KITAVA'S Thirst helmet. You can put this helmet on at level 44. The only downside to this helmet is that you need to be around level 50 for the build to come online, because you have to spend 100 mana on a skill for it to trigger. 50% chance to trigger. We kind of get around this by casting a lot more than 10 times a second. Actually, I should say, in this iteration, we get up to about 11.11? Yeah, 11.11. Which could be better, and will probably get better, but we'll talk about that later. The way the build works is, we have KITAVA'S Thirst. It triggers when we cast enough, it triggers when we cast a spell that costs enough mana. In this case, we are casting Unearth, which we are juicing the hell out of. Talk about that in a minute. It's hooked up to a bunch of things. We've actually got Inspiration in here along with Archmage. Probably the only time that happens, because we want to get it as close to 100 as possible without going under. Kind of like reverse blackjack. So what happens is, Unearth casts. It makes 5 corpses. Unearth casts again. It triggers Detonate Dead of Chain Reaction, which is our primary damage skill. And when you keep doing it, you get lots and lots of triggers very quickly. Of course, how do we sustain the mana? Well, we have a few things. Not that, obviously, that's going away. We have, I believe, this mastery, very important. 10% chance to recover 10% of your mana when you use a skill. What this means is, anytime you use a skill, you have a 10% chance to recover mana. Unfortunately, this is pretty much always going to be Unearth, so it's 10% for 10%. In addition to this, however, we have a few other tricks up our sleeve. The very big one, probably the most important thing for the build, is Essence Glutton. Essence Glutton, as far as I can tell, gives you the biggest flat mana regen bonus in the entire game. 4% of mana over 2 seconds when you consume a corpse, or 2% of mana every second. This is a huge base to work from. All of the percentage increases to your mana regeneration apply to this, and that's what makes it go. In addition to this, we have other corpse scaling benefits, 10% more damage, enemies deal 10% reduced damage, 30% AoE, which also very important. And then this is the big one. This is 2% increased attack and cast speed for each corpse consumed recently. And as you've already seen, we hit that cap pretty easily. It does have a spin up time, which is why there's maybe, you know, not always the clearest DPS indication when fighting a bigger boss. Although we get around that as well because the build has 1 million effective hit points. Yeah. It's tanky. Granted, I do believe it needs to have its endurance charges up for that, but there's ways to get that. More importantly, the build kind of just doesn't die, and that number I just used was without Molten Shell or anything like that active. Additionally, we have Mistress of Sacrifice. The skill to effect duration is nice for a lot of reasons, but the big thing about this is this allows us to achieve 75-75 block cap. You combine that with complete crit reduction, a few other bonuses, a Watcher's Eye that gives you more chances to recover 10% of mana when you use a skill, and everything starts to work. You're probably looking at this right now though and saying, how are you running Determination and Clarity? After all, I have no mana reserved, so obviously there is a blessing at work, and you can only have 1 aura active with a blessing. Wrong, you can only have 1 aura that reserves mana active with a blessing. I'm actually reserving life to get Clarity up and running, and yes, that does work. Very interesting, useful piece of tech that I see get slept on a lot. In addition to everything else, we have little things like critical strikes do not inherently ignite, but 100% increased damage off that. Very nice node. Some AoE over here, AoE here. These AoE nodes are kind of mandatory, in addition to getting 20% quality on Detonate Dead of Chain Reaction, which is good. Base radius. As you can see, the actual explosions are huge, and that allows us to have very good clear. Now, the build has a lot going on under the hood that needs to be said, done, worked with. For starters, our survivability is based on mind over matter. This is kind of how we double dip into our mana investment. We get this huge effective HP pool. Also, we have 2000 energy shield, which we are also dipping into. And even more than that, double dipping on both the energy shield and the mana, we are using Recoup. Recoup gives you a damage regen effect. I don't want to call it regen, I think it's just recovered, because obviously regen is disabled in some situations. But the way this works is any damage from hits is recouped by the percentage you have over 4 seconds following the hit. This is important because damage can apply to energy shield and mana, but it is still recouping on our life, which means that if we take a really big hit, the regen is way more than what the recoup would initiate success if you were just a life-based character. It's actually a very powerful defensive layer. You'll find that this build does not want to die. In fact, I still have not died on this character. It's only level 96, which isn't really as great as it should be, but I mean, this is Affliction League. This was a league that killed people. It's very good at killing people. I would run constantly fully juiced stuff, and I plan to show some more of that. In fact, right now, I'm going to go throw a map in the map device and talk about the build while I play it. I'm going to be lazy here and skip the league mechanic just because I haven't played in a while, and I would hate for my ineptitude to cost me my deathlessness. I'm pretty sure if I don't have that stuff active, nothing can kill me, though. Well, I shouldn't say that. I can absolutely still be killed. But, nothing will kill me for being an idiot, at least. I do not have... I should also mention, I have a new computer, which is probably why this is recording a lot better than you used to. And, yeah, so, as you can see, the build kind of just mulches through everything. I'm not playing particularly fast. I have not popped Molten Shell or anything like that. I don't think I'm going to need it anywhere in the map because, again, no juice in this build. Goes deathless with however much juice you can fit on it. My favorite thing about the build, though, is it's very smooth to play. The way I'm doing it is I'm kind of just like tapping the cast every once in a while, and that gets it going. And one of the nice things about the build is that while corpse scaling mechanics are being changed, first of all, Detonate Dead of Chaining is still just as strong as it was. And probably more important than that is that in the mapping scenario, a lot of the damage comes from like the corpses of the enemies that I'm consuming with the spell. And that does not rely on our nerf scaling, which did get nerfed a bit, and we're losing some tools for it. I don't know what the long-term effects of that are going to be. Oh, I don't even have my hotkey set right for Flame Dash. I was wondering why I wasn't moving as fast as I'm used to. The one thing you might notice is that my offering is just kind of up all the time. I do this with a cast cast when you use a skill. Intervention craft? No, not intervention, betrayal craft. How long has it been since I played the game? Anyway, okay, now they're dead. There's a Harvey King inside of a breach. The trial master to talk shit to me. He's a great guy. I like him a lot. As an additional something, I've taken the original boss fight footage from the last build guide that I released partway through Affliction, and I've gone ahead and sped it up just so that it's in here as a frame of reference. The build did the boss very well. It was trivial. I don't know what else to say about it. I just wanted to show that it gets it done. This is the non-quest version, so the actual mildly inconveniencing one. Not the hardest boss in the world, but you know, you gotta show people this sort of thing. I'm aware. You want to see that it does it, and if it does it this well, you know how quickly it's gonna smack the quest versions, because those things are piss easy. Moving along, here's the path of building. The real star of the show as far as this build is concerned. And it really happens right here in the notes section. I built this for last league, I have updated it. This is going to tell you everything you need to know. All the contingencies, some talk about how to level the build, when you need to switch to KITAVA'S Thirst. One of the nice things about this unique item is it's cheap. Even on day one, you're going to be getting this for between 1 to 5 chaos, probably like before you even hit maps, and you'll be able to transition into the full power version of the build. Because honestly, even if you skip Detonate Dead of Chain Reaction and don't buy that, this build, you can throw in Detonate Dead and like a Volatile Dead together, and that'll hold you over for a very long time, while still feeling very strong and tanky. The path of building has multiple trees to work with, We have, say, a start tree, which is like first 30 levels or so. Just getting basic stuff. You get mind over matter rather early because honestly, you need to start investing into mana rather early to be on time for the switch. Get to start 2. This is when you would switch to KITAVA'S Thirst if you had it as early as possible. As you can see, we pick up some nodes that increase the mana cost because you could switch before this, but what you really need is for it to cost 100 mana, and if you're using Archmage, you have to reach that breakpoint. Now, Archmage got changed, but it didn't get changed in a way that affects us, so you don't need to worry about that. You're going to be able to run Archmage just fine in this build. None of those changes affect the mana cost scaling here. In fact, I think it got a little easier because Forethought got changed, so that's pretty great. We've got kind of a start of mapping version of the tree. This is just to give you what you need to have your defenses in place. Mapping is kind of at its toughest when you first get there, in my opinion at least. Having your defenses in place is worth a lot. It's just that comfort that you can slip up and you will still crush everything in front of you. And then of course we have the final tree. This is level 96 tree. It's the everything is there tree, and it makes use of some pretty powerful defensive layers to get where it goes. Some things that you might not see elsewhere. I think I've already talked about Recoup, but also this mastery, which honestly is pretty insane. This gives us 100% increased armor and energy shield from equipped body armor, which is how we get this huge energy shield value overall. Now, doing that is a little bit tricky. I feel like I need to call attention to this. It's in the notes, but I'm going to call attention to it in the video. We need to use this base. It's called Nexus Gloves. The implicit on these gloves is all benefit. It also makes the mana sustain much more consistent. 30% chance when you pay a skills cost to gain that much mana. That really kind of does more than mana regen ever could, but more importantly, 30% reduced maximum mana actually improves your mana regen in relation to the mana cost because of the way it scales. At a certain point in this build, you start stacking reduced costs of skills because you want to get down to that 100 mana cost value. And an important thing to talk about with this pair of gloves is you'll notice it's an energy shield base, yet it has armor on it. That's because you have to essence craft these. You use an essence of, I don't remember what it's called, the armor essence, I'll put it right there or something. Oh, there, I'll put it right there or something. Outside of that, none of the gear is particularly strange or difficult to understand. It's all pretty basic. You don't need a lot of specific equipment. I guess the triple armor, energy shield, body armor is a little specific, but you kind of just do the best you can. You avoid the life roll because obviously the life mastery is really, not that one. The life mastery is really awesome in that situation. It's huge value. And I talked about this in the map clearing section in case I skipped it in the actual video. You want to essence craft with Essence of Fear a scepter, specifically a scepter, because you need elemental damage. Oh my goodness, there's so much to talk about here. If you don't know, we are scaling the secondary damage component of Detonate Dead. What this means is spell damage does not affect it. You need elemental, fire, or universal damage. Minion damage is also universal damage in this build because of spiritual aid. What this all means is you get your scepter because of the elemental damage implicit. You get a nice fracture like +1 all physical spell skill gems. You throw an Essence of Fear at it for that guaranteed minion damage, which affects everything. And then you craft on Trigger. This comes from Betrayal, and this is what makes our offering up all the time. And since we're always putting corpses on the ground, we have 100% uptime, and we just have tap block. And it's all automatic. You don't have to worry about it at all. I also put Flammability and Wave of Conviction in there for like a little extra punch, you know? Helps when you run into a tanky rare, and if they survive for more than a second, you spin up to that 200% increased cast speed, and Flammability comes out, and Wave of Conviction, and they melt. I will add, there's some Wildwood stuff stuck in here, kind of vestigial. It helps, it's good. Most of it doesn't actually show up in a way that affects the POB though, and I've already compensated for them being removed. Like Corpse Life, that doesn't matter. You have to enter in a value here, and I've entered that in manually. I've already changed it for what we're losing, and we are losing a bit. There's kind of a nerf to this build with what they did to Unearth's quality. That said, there was room for the build to grow, and I'm not terribly concerned about it. I'm kind of excited to see what other tools we're going to find in Necropolis to make up for it, because there is definitely room to shift those resources elsewhere to make the build stronger again. And I'm going to be live streaming. I'm going to be doing updates on the build. Stuff will come out Even if I find nothing, this build is still strong enough to get you through those first couple weeks, get your stones, the Atlas, and clear maps so damn well that you'll be able to finance, you know, a proper late game, end game build. Because a lot of League starters don't go the distance in a way that's cost effective. I'm sure anyone who's experienced can tell you this. You get to a situation where if you want to go to the next step where you're like farming Ubers, you play a build made for that you really can't League start. It needs very specific gear. It's very expensive. This build ain't that. Well, I mean, it might become that. I haven't figured out how to do it yet, but real quickly, here's a little clip of me using the skill so you can see what's actually happening with the mana bar down in the corner here. It maintains pretty well. We're losing a little bit of that, but most of what we get does not come from the Wildwood. As you can see, when it gets to the really spun up point, it can get low and you can get bad RNG streaks, which is actually why I keep a mana flask on the belt. Just a little heads up about that, because before you get everything, you can dump out your mana, and that's a bit of a concern. It's why you run a mana flask, because that's also part of your effective HP, but it does eventually stabilize entirely, more or less. It's hard to find a situation in a prolonged fight where you don't step for 1 second, and if you stop casting for 1 second, it's back. As a final note about the build, it does have one kind of weakness. We do lean heavily on the Pantheon to handle things like chill, shock, and freeze. 60% reduced effect there, 50% reduced effect there, obviously complete freeze avoidance. The downside here is that we don't actually have 100% reduced effective chill and shock. Obviously, all this said, you can fill that in with the correct boots or gloves craft. This has strength, which is kind of a bit load-bearing right now. This has fire and chaos, which I think I could nix. Yeah, I could get away with nixing it. I would lose my chaos cap, but it's enough chaos to be fine. You kind of weigh your priorities there. With better gear, you have room for everything, and the gear on this character isn't like really, really good. It's just pretty good. But yeah, that's the build. I hope you're excited. It's very durable, but most importantly, and probably something I should have said earlier in the video, it's fun. There is something magical about cast when cast, you know? Just, you cast the spell, and it triggers a bigger spell. And it looks like that, which is, you know, a massive, massive benefit. Anyway, I will see you all on Necropolis launch, whether you're playing this build or not. I hope you have a great time, and have a good one, Exiles.